Mr. Spiegel, I want to ask, at what stage are the negotiations between Greece and its European partners in order to vote the pack of the priorities and complete the disbursement of 2 billion euros?
Well, I mean, we basically have 3 or 4 days left. And what is interesting to me is that this is the first real significant sort of fight between the creditors and the government since the September elections. Everything seems to be going relatively smoothly, but this fight, particularly over foreclosure law in Greece, is the first sort of significant battle we've seen since the election, and it's raised some nervousness about whether Tsipras himself is fully committed to the program. But you know, Tsakalotos has made very clear to other finance ministers that there will be a deal by Monday. So we have to sort of accept it at face value right now. They're really in the weeds, sort of deciding what elements of this foreclosure law need to be changed. And so we'll see. You know, Monday, this has to get done relatively quickly because it's not just the 2 billion euros at stake here. It's the 10 billion that is needed for the bank recapitalization. And that has to be completed in the next, 4 or 5 weeks to get it done before the end of the year. So it's pretty high stakes. The Greek government has said they're committed to getting something done by early next week. But I think at this point, we just have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. On this matter, do you think that it's possible to reach a deadlock which will affect the recapitalization of banks? And if this happens, what will be the consequences?
I think it's still, there is a chance at this. Now, to be honest with you, we have the two parties that are most likely to cause a standoff or some sort of gridlock here are the Greeks on one side and the Germans on the other. Now, what we know about the Germans right now is they are pretty preoccupied with another crisis, the refugee crisis. So the question is whether the Germans are going to go to the mats on this, whether they're going to really fight to the last man on this issue. My sense is, despite some rhetoric about coming out of Berlin, that they're willing to push this into next year as a threat, that actually they got bigger things to worry about right now. Merkel's in trouble at home on refugees. The political environment in Germany right now. I was just there a few weeks ago. Greece is not even on the radar. So my sense is they don't want to pick a fight on this right now. So my sense is there will be a compromise. But let's be honest, if there is not a compromise, this gets very dangerous very quickly. Because the whole reason getting done by the end of the year is to prevent the Greek bank recapitalization from happening under new rules that go in effect in January 1. And I have talked to German officials, and they say they are very willing to let it go into January. And what happens if it goes into January is the money that comes to help pay for the bailout is not only from private investors, from governments, from the ESM. It could be account holders, it could be deposit holders who get quote unquote bailed in. So that's the risk. The risk if it goes into January, the new rules allow for depositor bail-ins, and that would be a mess because it's not a whole lot of individuals who have over 100,000 euros in the accounts, but there are a lot of small businesses in Greece that have payroll that would get hit. And there's a lot of nervousness, particularly at the ECB, that this could really damage Greek economic activity in the next year or two. So that's the urgency. It's got to get done before the end of the year because of that. My sense is that the Germans they don't want to fight on this right now because they got other fights they're worrying about. So I think my bet is right now that we'll get a deal done by next week.
Okay. You said about the refugee crisis. The Greek government is trying to bring to the negotiating table the budgetary aspects of the refugee crisis and achieve some relief. It's possible this?
Yeah, because it's not just that is trying to do this. The Italians in particular have actually been much more aggressive on this than even the Greeks have been. The Italians have been pushing Padoan, the Italian finance minister, has been very public, arguing that this is an unexpected event. The EU budget rules allow for flexibility in unexpected events like this. And the indications from the European Commission right now is that on a country-by-country basis, they may be willing to allow some flexibility. Now, the question to me is how hard Tsipras pushes this. Is it just he wants some flexibility, or does he want further concessions? Further concessions on, for instance, remember the big fight in July was over the value-added tax in the islands. Does he come back and say, well, look, let's allow or costs or some of these islands that are really affected by the refugee crisis, should we delay, should we carve out some of the the VAT increases for those islands? Does he ask for things that are above and beyond what would be normal flexibility? Does he hold this hostage for the debt relief conversation? Does he say to the Germans, look, if you want us to help out on refugees, we are going to need real big debt relief? I mean, the question is, to what extent does Tsipras push this really hard? I think he'll find acceptance for some limited flexibility on budget, like the Italians will get. I think if he tries to push it further, he's going to get a fight. But to be honest with you, in this area now, he has a lot of leverage. I mean, the Germans are in a panic on refugees. You've seen what they've done with the Turks. They're willing to give 3 billion euros to the Turks. Merkel showed up in Istanbul to sit next to Erdogan a week before elections. If they're willing to do that to the Turks, I think they're also willing to go to say, we're also that we're willing to provide some help on this front. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But Tsipras has to tread very carefully on this one.
Okay. Until now, the government of Alexis Tsipras had the support of large parts of the Greek people. Do you think that in Brussels are concerned in some way that with these tough and painful measures, this can be changed and cause problems?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, the dynamic is slightly different. I think there was a assumption here in Brussels before the September elections that Tsipras was damaged. I think the view was that the management of the crisis for the first 6 months of the Tsipras government was so bad that they believed that New Democracy would do pretty well in the September elections. And if New Democracy didn't do well, then at least Tsipras' support would be diffused, that perhaps Lafazanis would get some of it, that other parties would get it. The fact that Syriza was able to sort of repeat its performance in January, I think came as a bit of a surprise. So the hope of the understanding, I think, here now is, okay, Tsipras has shed Lafazanis, the left wing of the party has disappeared. He now has run an election based on implementing the program, and therefore he is going to do it, and has the backing of the Greek people to do that. I think that's a slight misreading of the situation. I think what we've seen even over the last week or two is that there is debate within the coalition, not only from Manel within Syriza itself, over how much of the agreement can be accepted. There are efforts to try to renegotiate, and we've seen on this foreclosure issue. The Greek government is clearly trying to send the message: listen, to the Troika, to the Quartet, whatever you want to call it. If you force us to do more, we will lose the support of the Greek people that we gained during the elections. I'm not sure the Troika, the Germans, buy that argument, because it is a very similar argument that Samaras made in the middle of last year. Frankly, it's the same argument that Papandreou made in 2011. This argument that we will lose the Greek people if you don't go easy on us. And I think the assumption here in Brussels is the Greek people believe that their future lies with Europe, that their future lies in the euro, and that just because Syriza loses domestic support is not going to sort of suddenly cause the Greek people to change on Europe. So I don't think there's really a chance right now of the Germans and the Troika going easy on this, just because Syriza says that they could lose the Greek people's support on this. I don't think that works very well as an argument with Brussels.
If you could tell me who is the closest ally among institutions, among the Quartet at this time, who will be?
It's basically two organizations that I would say that are the closest allies to Tsipras right now. First is the Commission. Almost from the beginning of the Juncker Commission, both Jean-Claude Juncker and Pierre Moscovici, the economic commissioner, have really pushed, and some would say have damaged themselves in the view of other institutions and in the view of Berlin, by so closely aligning themselves with Tsipras and basically trying to get a deal done almost at any cost. For the critics. So you clearly have a strong ally in the Commission, and also sort of since June-July period, a very strong ally in the French. Hollande himself, but particularly Sapin, the finance minister, when it comes to the Eurogroup and it comes to the more detailed conversations. So the French and the Commission have continued to be the strongest allies of Tsipras. The problem is you have, frankly, I would argue, stronger allies on the other side. The IMF, very clearly, the Germans, very clearly. The ECB traditionally has been a bit of a swing, but they are very much now in the camp of the Germans and the IMF. And frankly, most of the rest of the Eurogroup. There are very few allies, even in other parts of Southern Europe, like Italy, Spain, you don't see a huge amount of support for Syriza right now. Obviously, the Spanish, in particular, with elections coming up, they don't want to see the Eurogroup be lenient towards Syriza. This has been a dynamic that's played out over the summer as well. So I think, other than the Commission and the French, Syriza has very, very few allies in this discussion. But the French and the Commission are two very strong and important allies, to demean their effect.
About the debt relief, we saw both IMF and the president of the Eurogroup presented their plans on the matter. There will be convergence?
I don't think there is convergence yet. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure we've seen formal presentations by either side. I think what we're seeing is a lot of negotiating through the media, to be honest with you. The IMF has come out with some very, very tough levels to hit. I mean, they're talking about 60-year extension of maturities, 40-year grace periods. I mean, really things that the Germans could not accept, I don't think. You've seen sort of Dijsselbloem come out and talk about this sort of 15% annual financing needs. Again, that is something that in general reports, but that is something that the Eurogroup is only talking about in the next 10 years, where it's easy to hit that. They're not really looking 30, 40 years out there, and the IMF is going to ask for more. So I think what we're seeing now is there's not been a real negotiation yet. Those real serious negotiations won't start until the first review ends, which could be next year. But what we're seeing is this bit of a kabuki dance. The IMF and the Germans and the Eurogroup itself are trying to sort of feel each other out. Where is the landing? And again, we really know even where the Greek government stands on this just yet. It was interesting to me that Tsakalotos was in London this week and gave a speech at the London School of Economics, where he actually offered grace periods that were less than the IMF was demanding. He was talking 15 to 20 years. The IMF has been talking 30 to 40 years. So this is the Germans, the IMF, and the Greeks all circling each other here, and I'm not sure we know where the landing place is just yet. And I'm not sure that, and I know for a fact that the negotiations haven't been seriously engaged yet.
We can see that from the first moment there are differences between Greek government and the creditors on the measures that will pass. Do you think there is a room for flexibility, or may we see again the moments of summer?
I mean, again, it depends on who gets the upper hand here. I think there is very little willingness for any flexibility in the German finance ministry. This is not just a dynamic that has happened in the last 6 months, the last 5 years. There has always been a hard line in the German finance ministry that was hardened in July. I think the fight with Varoufakis, the fight with Syriza more broadly, really angered the German finance ministry, angered German public opinion, and you saw real hardening of positions there in Germany. So if it's up to the Germans, I think there would be zero flexibility. But again, the dynamic we've seen is Germany is preoccupied with the refugee crisis. Does this mean that the Germans are distracted and that other elements in the Eurogroup, in the institutions who are in favor of more flexibility, are getting an upper hand? And let's remember, the IMF is not really engaged right now. They're not part of the third program. So although they're sitting there at the table, this is being run by the Europeans, and the question is to what extent the Germans are going to push very hard for zero flexibility. We'll have to see. I think it will be a really good test case this week and coming and early next week to see what is the result of this fight over the foreclosure law. Does the government get some flexibility on this front? If they do, I think that's a sign that there is some willingness to go easy on Syriza and a distracted Germany not willing to pick a fight. If this gets protracted for days, for weeks, I think it's a bad sign. I think it's a sign that the camp that is against flexibility has an upper hand still.
Okay, and my last question for you: when we can say with more confidence that the risk of a Brexit has passed?
Boy, I mean, I'm not sure we're going to see that anytime soon. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, this is something that ever since Schäuble put that document on the table that advocated temporary Brexit, I think that's something been hanging over Greece for some time. Much like the 2012 fight at Cannes at the end of 2012, October 2012, where Sarkozy and Merkel publicly said at a press conference that it's up to the Greek people to decide in or out. once that was breached, it hung over the Greek economy for a good 2 years, frankly. I think this Schäuble paper did real damage in that regard, and I think it's going to take another years, frankly, for that cloud to be lifted, and that's going to affect, foreign investors. Are you going to want to invest in Greece when this shadow of Brexit is still there, where your investment being in euro could come out in drachma? I think it's been really damaging, and I don't think it's going to go away for some time, to be honest with you.